everybody. Today is November 1st, 2022, and this is the latest episode of the George's Geek Hub podcast. My name is George, and I am your lame host. So, today we're going to be talking about a few things that have been going on that are in big news right now. For example, Elon Musk. Elon Musk finally bought Twitter. And I didn't think he was going to do it. I thought he was backing out and playing the game. And I'm not surprised that he actually did. So, like, after he finally bought Twitter, he wasn't even the owner of Twitter for 24 hours, and he already began to make huge waves. So, a few things he immediately fired the CEO, the chief financial officer. He immediately fired the chief legal counsel, and so he's fired all sorts of people. He fired the board. Um, so now he is literally just flying solo at Twitter. And as far as the leadership is concerned, of course, the employees are still there. But yeah, so like right after that too, he had Tesla engineers check all the code for Twitter and make sure that Twitter engineers didn't leave a backdoor while he had them locked out of everything. And I think he might have fired them too, but I'm not sure. Either way, um, yeah. So he's doing all sorts of changes. So one of the things that he's wanting to have happen is a sort of advisory board, not anything like the one that Facebook attempts to run. That's just a joke, but I think he's actually trying to do something real where like regular people who are users of Twitter uh, can actually have their voice and say in policy, and that's going to be how he makes decisions, not based on what the advertisers say, not based on uh, just what the board says. So it's interesting the changes that are being made. Um, for one, he wants to change the way Twitter handles the blue verified check mark. And I think that's a really good idea because it was never really clear how you would go about getting that blue checkbox. And so, I mean, essentially, everything that I know about it says that Twitter just gives it to the people or pages that they feel just deserve it. So if they think it's you're significant enough, then you get one. So that's really not a good way to go about doing it. I don't know that Elon Musk's policy of letting people pay like $8 a month or 20 a month or whatever it ends up being. We don't know. But I don't know that that's something that uh, should actually be done that way. But I guess it depends on what do you want that verified by Twitter to actually mean. Because what if it just simply means verified, like this is a real person, and of course you could verify that is true if somebody has valid payment credentials, for example. So I don't know what his definition is going to be, but the definition is definitely changing, even though he's not making it sound like it's going to change. But it really is. And so, yes, that's what's going on in the world of Twitter. That's like the big thing right now that's been going on. And I really don't know what all else is going to change because I think he's definitely joined the ranks of a lot of other well, I should say a few other celebrities that have either started or purchased platforms. For example, Kanye West just bought Parler. Donald Trump started his own, and all of them have been banned from mainstream social media. Although Elon Musk has let Kanye West return. Although I think Kanye West actually goes by Ye, is it? I don't know. I don't keep up with all the celebrity names and news and what they change their names and everything else to. I just know that if I say Kanye West, you know exactly who it is that I'm talking about. I mean, the dude's nuts, but he's the kind of nuts that I can kind of sort of get behind and like. I mean, he misses the mark on a lot of stuff, but then there's the things that he gets right. But I'm talking about Kanye. I'm not, and it's kind of sort of the same way with Elon, but Elon's the guy that's got all these billions, and so it gets me is so many people think that he kind of represents anybody, like any normal people rather, and that's really not the case. He doesn't actually represent anybody but Elon Musk. So unless you are also Elon Musk, who have the same goals, the same things, then There's literally no way he represents you entirely. But I'm not saying he doesn't have good ideas. Like, I definitely think that there is way too much censorship. I mean, I just came off of a 30-day Facebook ban for something that should not have should not have happened. And so, like, yeah, I talked about it in a video, um, and I kind of hope that somebody watches that and interacts with me a little bit and shares some of your stories on dumb bans. But that was definitely a thing that came up with the mainstream social media. So I can see why some of these celebrities got banned. Like, it made sense why they banned Donald Trump, but I don't know what the future is for Donald Trump. So so what Elon said is that everybody he's doing away with the permanent bans, but as far as who's getting unbanned and when and how much longer, nobody knows yet. We're just gonna have to wait for him to announce that. So it's interesting that some of these people are coming back that have been previously banned, but you know, and yet a lot of them have come out and put out their own social media network, like Truth Social, or buying existing ones. I mean, I can kind of see the appeal to starting your own social network after being banned from one. Like, I did it. I mean, I haven't had anybody sign up for it yet, but georgesgeekhub.com, I definitely have the same kinds of attitudes towards content moderation that Elon Musk and Kanye West and even Donald Trump have, in the sense that I don't believe in automated methods to police things. I mean, what gets me is, like, I've been on the internet socializing with people since 2002. I was 12 or 13 when I first got online, got in my first chat room, started talking with just other people from around the world. And it was kind of weird at first because I was talking to people, I made friends with people that I would probably never meet. I mean, looking at all these past years, out of everybody that was in those groups, I think I met like two of them, maybe no, four of them. I met four people, maybe five. I think it was five. And so there were, let's see here, one from GameSpy Arcade, and the other four were all from IRC. And I'm not going to name them, but it might have actually been six. But that's like five or six out of probably hundreds. And so, and that's a lot of the mileage that those numbers still ring true for even people today. They'll socialize with people, and it's kind of turned into this antisocial attitude. Like, I don't know how many people you have on your lists that do this, but every now and then I have a few people that are like, oh, don't like my stuff, or don't share my now, don't share my stuff makes sense, but don't like my stuff or don't comment unless I tag you. And it's like, look, you're on social media. This isn't anti-social media. If you don't want to socialize, stay the heck off. But, like, even more important, back in the old, the early 2000s, if you were online and you saw something that you didn't like, you know what they would tell you to do back then? Now, first off, we still had rules against like hate speech and stuff like that. So, I mean, there were limits. It wasn't like it was the Wild West with a free for all, but it felt like the Wild West compared to how it is now. Back then, you could say stuff, and if somebody didn't like your message, they were forced to just leave, block you, not talk to you. The answer was block the person you don't want to hear from. And so we've moved away from just block and turn your head, and only report it if it's hate speech, to here's what's happening now is people have their own definitions of hate speech. They're whining to these websites anyway, and a lot of these websites are forgetting that this isn't, you know, the catering to the Karens for one. Because people don't know how to block. They don't know how to turn their head. They don't know how to leave the group that that bothers them. And so the internet used to be the place to go if you were looking for free speech, because there was always problems in the past. In the real world, if you want to sit in a room full of your peers and you want to say something very unpopular, you would lose friends. You would run into problems. You would have all sorts of problems just for speaking freely. And it's understandable why you would have that problem. That makes sense. How do you look somebody in the eye and say something really unpopular? Like, I don't think you should have, the tax revenue that you get to your department or whatever it is that you're talking to. I mean, there's so many things, or flat out just, telling somebody, well, I don't think that somebody of your size should be wearing the things that you wear. And, but people will say that online. And you used to be able to get away with saying stuff. You used to be able to get away with, and the reason why is because the infrastructure wasn't there to abuse the and I don't mean abuse the people complaining. I mean abusing the people who want to just have a genuine discussion. People who want to talk. There's all sorts of things that are now very unpopular to talk about, and people have these fantasies about who they want to be. And okay, so for example, you get the issue of like transgender. And I don't want to sit here and make anybody think that I'm against people who are transgender. That's not the issue at all. But there's a certain degree where there's people who want to ignore science. So, for example, you can have gender reaffirming surgery. You can take hormones. I mean, you can literally tear down your body, restructure it, reprogram it effectively. That's what the surgery and the hormones actually do, and end up outwardly appearing the gender that you wish to live as. And so that's that's one thing. But what isn't going to change is the fact that your chromosomes are XY. This is science. Until something happens and we actually have a procedure that can change somebody's DNA like that, that's still a irrefutable truth. And so, but I think the problem with that is people are, you know, they're forbidding conversations about stuff like that because somehow it's hate speech if you turn around and remind them of that certain truth. And it's like, you can't sit there and deny truth. You can't deny science. And so this goes to the same people that want to use religion as a means to control what other people say or do. I despise that. So you get Christianity, and specifically Christians. They're the worst at it, but it's really a lot of the Abrahamic faiths too. Like I would say that's right behind Christians that have really terrible beliefs and policies would be the Muslims. Um, and granted, it's different degrees, different. You know, it's weird because for everything that they're similar, they're different. But my point is, both of those groups, they're really bad about, say, equal rights for women and men. And people use those religions to justify racism. Wars have been fought over them. And ultimately, they're using these religions to hurt people. And so we now have that thrown into the mix of the online chatter too. Now that's always been a thing. I remember having discussions with people online about about their religion, about how they feel about things, but they're using religion as a way of just saying, hey, because I believe this certain way of doing things, we shouldn't talk about this online, or we shouldn't talk about this in a group, or that offends me if you're going to talk about this topic, you know. And that's bullcrap because if you don't believe in a certain way, then don't go to those groups. And social media is that weird animal anyway because the so first off, we had MySpace, and then Facebook eventually took over because it filled all the gaps that MySpace was lacking, and a lot of that was security. And so, what Facebook was really good about for many years was keeping a lot of the fake accounts, the bots off. And nowadays, that's changed. It's easy to get on. They those methods finally don't work anymore. Um, and so, I don't think that you know that Facebook's going to last forever, not in its current form. But I don't think we're going to have something that's going to replace Facebook. I think what's going to happen is Facebook's going to continue to evolve. I mean, the parent company's already renamed itself to Meta. And what's to say that we don't eventually get told to call the site itself Meta? But as it stands, I think Facebook is just the product name of Meta's main product service, whatever you want to call it. So that's pretty much that. I'll probably talk about that more on later in future podcasts. But I mean, my thing is the internet's definitely changed, and it just boils down to I think the more and more people have been let on, the more and more immature that society reveals itself to be, which is sad. But yeah, so speaking of things that are sad, what about, I'm thinking treatment of squirrels. I got a message from our resident squirrel.
Good afternoon. This is Nutty the Squirrel with a public service announcement. And if you've ever wondered why I just come in and show up and just do whatever the hell I want, it's because I'm a squirrel. And you know what? There's nothing you can do about it except maybe hit me with your car. But that would be really mean. And I don't know why people do that. Can't they just see when the squirrels are trying to run across? I mean, I know that we don't look. We're just trying to get to the next tree because there's more nuts over there and we're hungry. And plus, it's getting cold out. We're getting ready to hibernate, so we've got to get all these nuts. And you really shouldn't try to hit us with cars. So that's my public service announcement. Don't hit squirrels.
Yep, don't go hitting squirrels. That's not awesome at all. So, but yeah, so anyway, so with big news, we got Star Wars has a lot of stuff that's happening right now. And so with Andor, so Andor, we are, I believe we're about 9 episodes in, and I'm not sure exactly how many more we're supposed to have, but this has been really good lately. And so I've been watching it from the beginning. And so so the background of Andor, for those of you that haven't watched it yet, is that so if you've watched Rogue One, Cassian Andor was the pilot that the main character gets introduced to. Ultimately, he's the one that gets the plans for the Death Star and transmits it to the Tantive Four. So the rebellion does what it did in the very first Star Wars movie of blowing up the Death Star. So it's a prequel thing, and yeah, so it's really interesting because it starts him off as before he's even part of anything, and all we know in the beginning is that been in some legal trouble. He's been on the lookout for by the Empire. He kills some guards of a corporation that has power. And in corporations in Star Wars, that's really dystopian the way that they portray them having power. But at any rate, of course, the only thing more powerful than a corporation in Star Wars is the Empire. So you know, but the point is, so it's about this guy that if ultimately we know how his story ends. He dies on what was it, Scarab Base? I think that was the name of the planet. Scarab. I can't remember. It's been a while since I watched it. But either way, the end scene of that movie, we see him with the Death Star blowing up the planet uh, because they were trying to stop the transmission of the plans, and of course it didn't work out. But so this is how he gets roped into the rebellion. This shows the beginnings of the rebellion. Um, and it's really fascinating how that plays out. But yeah, so we see all sorts of parts of the Star Wars universe before we see what we know of Star Wars, and because it's nice because between episodes 3 and 4, there was all sorts of stories to fill in, and so we get stuff like the Bad Batch, we get stuff like um, Star Wars Rebels, we get stuff like Rogue One, we get stuff like Andor, and the list goes on. And so, and of course, Mandalorian and Boba Fett take place after Return of the Jedi, but those still show some callbacks to this time as well. And it's just fascinating watching. So years ago when they released Star Trek Enterprise, I was really critical of why they released a prequel of Star Trek because there really wasn't a reason to go back in time. Star Trek had always moved forward, but Star Wars always had stuff to fill in, and there's still more and more stuff to fill in. And I think they're doing it, and it's very strategically on purpose to create gaps that they can fill in. So like episode 7, that that has a period of I think like 20 years, something like that, between episode 6 and 7. And so there was all sorts of stuff to fall in between there. So we get stuff like The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, or that shows the uh, after years of the Empire, when the Empire was on the decline, still existed, but it wasn't like it was. And I think that's really important to realize that the Empire didn't just completely collapse when the Death Star 2 exploded, but it definitely lost its power, it lost its leadership. I mean, in the same day the Emperor and his right-hand man Darth Vader died, although what happened with Palpatine later, kind of maybe he didn't die. There's all sorts of theories on that one. I'd like to hear yours. But either way, it worked really well for Star Wars, but I don't think it worked for Star Trek. But that's the whole thing, though. Like they're trying that with Star Trek. So Star Trek has had a really interesting year this year so far. So we have season 2 of Picard. We've had another season of Discovery. Strange New Worlds came out, and right now we're going through another season of Lower Decks. And I love Lower Decks. I'll talk about it a little bit, but to me, I just enjoy watching it. It's a really good fan service. Like, I don't actually care whether or not what they show on Lower Decks is really canon, but I do find it interesting that they are taking Lower Decks into Strange New Worlds. So I'm hoping that I haven't seen it yet. Maybe it's gonna be in this week's episode, but at some point we're supposed to see um, something happen with the Lower Decks main characters, Boimler and Mariner, and they're supposed to be going back in time to when Pike was captain of the Enterprise for Strange New Worlds. And we know this because we keep seeing art. There's lots of talk about it for season 2 of Strange New Worlds, where these two characters are absolutely gonna make an appearance at some point. So I don't like that a lot of these shows have been um, serialized. That's the word I was looking for. Serialized. And I like the idea of an overall story arc. And it just drives me nuts because Star Trek used to pull it off without being completely serialized. Like they'd have like Next Generation had story arcs, but then the story arcs would end. But that's also because episode seasons of Star Trek back then had like 25 to 30 episodes. Now we're lucky to see more than 10. And I appreciate that they're doing better quality, but I would very much like to eventually see Star Trek closer to the way it used to be. But which in one hand in the other, what'll fill up first, right? But they're kind of meeting us halfway in the middle with with Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and that's what I think is fascinating, is because they still have the small number of episode thing going on. Um, they do have it does kind of show that it's part of the story arc of Star Trek Discovery, and so there's definitely bits and pieces of stuff that it goes back to because they introduced Pike and this particular crew, at least key members of it, uh, in Discovery before they introduced us to the rest of the crew. So, like for example, we understand we got introduced to Pike in Discovery. That we found out that's when Pike found out his fate. Of course, we know. So a lot of this is interesting. So, like Pike, for example, we know how Pike's career ended. We know how Pike's life ended because in the original series, this was discussed. And so this is kind of goes back to Star Wars, where they're filling in. Well, Star Trek and Star Wars are doing this now, which is wonderful. So they're filling in these stories. Yeah, and Obi-Wan. I don't know why I missed out on Obi-Wan. I didn't miss out on it. I just forgot to mention it. So yeah, so Star Wars has had a really good run this year as well, and Obi Wan. So I'm hoping that I've understood things right. That they're going to have another season of Obi Wan coming up. To my knowledge and everything that I remember reading anyway, that originally it was supposed to be a single season. That was it, and so many people liked it that I think they decided to change their mind and maybe they're going to do another one. I really don't know. I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope that's what it is because it's been really good. And so the interesting thing about a character like Obi-Wan is we know how that character starts and we know how that character ends. And so we know that there's certain things that won't happen. For example, like in that big showdown between Vader and Obi Wan, that was a really, really crazy lightsaber battle. But we knew that neither one of them were going to die. We knew that nothing bad was really going to happen to either one of them, that it was just going to be one hell of a fight. And that's exactly what it was. And so that's what I think is interesting. You know, they're filling in all these stories. So, like it's like with Captain Pike, we know how he started, we know how he ended. So we know that no matter what happens in Strange New Worlds, we're not going to see the man die. And if we do, so it's Star Trek. So nobody really dies in Star Trek, right? Well, they say that because you consider like what happened with Spock back in the movies, the original series movies. They killed Spock off, but then they brought him back in the next movie. But yeah, they nobody really dies in Star Trek. So they could in theory have a thing where he dies, kind of, but then they bring him back. But I don't know why they would do that because we already know he doesn't really die, and we don't need that kind of suspense. That would be just extraneous bull to the particular show for to drag the fans. Now I'll tell you what was bull was them killing off Hemmer. That made me mad. I liked him. I mean I knew something was gonna happen to him eventually because because that wasn't the chief engineer of the Enterprise that we all knew and loved from the original series, but still, it's like, come on now, Hammer was awesome. We could have had another couple seasons of him, and I wouldn't have been disappointed. But it's all right. He was a great character, and I hope that whoever replaces him is another character that we can fall in love with. So I guess that begs the question, though: are they gonna somehow cast Scotty? Because in the last episode of Strange New Worlds, they did kind of show somebody that was Scotty. They didn't show him, but had a voice actor anyway, and that would be interesting. So yeah, we won't know until next season of Strange New Worlds. So yeah, that's all the sci-fi news that I've got. So on to some more important stuff. So again, I'm back on Facebook. I'm not banned anymore. Haven't really posted much. I haven't touched any of the pages, especially for George's Geek Hub. It's been a little minute since I've posted actual videos. I don't think I'm going to be posting this podcast on the actual YouTube site anymore. It doesn't make any sense for me to do that. Um, I might do. It might. So you might see it on YouTube this one last time, but ultimately, what's going to happen is I'm going to have podcasts just on their own site, and I'm gonna make it so that way you can get things in your own podcast viewer. Excuse me. I'm gonna also fix it so you can get it on Spotify, however you get your podcasts. So that's gonna be what's coming up with that. But yeah, so some important things though. Um, I'm gonna be coming back to doing more content. I'm really trying to push out more content, more regular content. Um, Work's been interesting for me, and I'm not gonna say too much about like where I work or whatever, but I was working at a place for uh, the better part of this year. Some things happened. It really wasn't working out for me or them, so that employment has ended, and I'm transitioning to a part-time position that will allow me more time to produce content and do research. And also, I'm getting into scam baiting. So that's going to be interesting. I don't want to say too much about that right now. I'm really just in the research and setup phase. And once I start doing stuff, it's going to be a little bit of me practicing before I start putting content out online relating to it. But after I watched people like Pierogi on Scammer Payback, Kit Boga, Jim Browning, and there's a whole bunch of others that I've been watching. It's just so many, I'm not going to be able to name them all, but a lot of really good guys that do this. And so I realized I do possess the ability to do these same things. It's something I believe in, and I absolutely love to with people who hurt people. So that's going to be a thing that I eventually start doing. And it's just right now I'm just gathering up my tools, so to speak. I'm doing some research. I'm getting everything set up because that's something I want to do. It's something I believe in, and ultimately I want to start educating people, not just on whatever I feel like putting videos about, but really the whole cause for me is just educating people who don't know and just how to be safe online, how these scams work. And so I really want to reach out to community centers, churches, just anybody that is in a position to work with society's most vulnerable to be able to educate them about how to not get scammed. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I I'm gonna be a little better prepared for my next one. Like I said, this was me trying to put something together, and I didn't. I had the stuff on top of my head. I really don't like reading stuff off scripts. Every time that I've done stuff with scripts, it sounds robotic, it sounds bad, or I try to do it in front of a camera, and it's like you can tell that I'm reading. Like I'm just overly sensitive, and maybe people like what I put out anyway. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm you know it's just too early to tell. And so yeah, that's what I'm doing at this point. Um, I look forward to seeing you guys down the road.